Let me begin with thanking the organizing committee for the tremendous work they have done to organize this commemorative event. I think this is the biggest commemoration event we've ever had since I arrived in this country the last 5 years. So I thank you very much for your time and effort you put together to organize this event. I want to thank Excellencies ambassadors and friends who have come from different continents, United Kingdom, from Nigeria, from Belgium. People have come from Canada, from different states in this country, all coming here to join us to remember the people who perished in the 1994 genocide committed against Tutsi. Ambassador Walkley, the representative of the United States government, I really want to express on behalf of His Excellency President Paul Kagame and the government and the people of Rwanda for a very strong message of support that we received today from President Obama and the message from the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, regarding the 18th commemoration of genocide committed against the Tutsi. Dear Rwandans, dear friends, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, every year on this day, 7th of April, all Rwandans around the world come together with friends to remember those innocent civilians who were killed, butchered in a cold-blooded genocide that was committed against Tutsi in 1994. On this occasion, we come together as we have done every year since 1994 with the purpose of expressing our collective grief and to gain strength from one another so that the words of never again can become a reality. I welcome all of you here today, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart that you have taken time from your busy lives and schedules on this Easter weekend to join us in this important commemorative event. This is the opportunity to show the world and to reiterate our promise that we will never forget our loved ones, those who died senselessly. The need to remain steadfast in our commitment to ensure that those who perished during the genocide are not forgotten is needed now more than ever before. Because this 18th commemoration, as it has been mentioned by different speakers, comes at the time when the perpetrators of the very same genocide are gaining ground in trying to write our history, essentially denying that the genocide never happened. They do it themselves, but also with their followers and friends, at times claiming to be the victims themselves. When they are pressed hard, they tend to admit, but admit on the condition that it was a double genocide. It is done through a very sick attempt to cover up their wrongdoings. As Dr. Smith mentioned, trying to create a level playing field. But we have to be clear at this moment that the genocide that was committed in Rwanda in 1994, we have to stress this, was committed against the Tutsi population. There's no ambiguity in terms of understanding what happened during that time. This is a historical fact, and there is no one who can change this fact. As it was covered by the presenters, the state premeditated, planned, and executed the extermination of the Tutsi population. And by all accounts, this was accomplished, was engineered by the state. And it was very clear from the evidence the targeted population were Tutsi. And we have to make sure that we correct the mistakes that we've been doing, all of us, collectively, by calling it the Rwandan genocide. I understand it is the official narrative. It's the official version from the United Nations Security Council. It's the official version for almost every other government. I think it is high time, through the research that we have seen today, the survivors and all of us, to clearly say that this was the genocide committed against the Tutsi. So to me, continuing to name it as Rwandan genocide, it is misleading. And if you like, it's actually denying the state-sponsored killings that were committed against the Tutsi population. So we must push for a narrative that will clearly indicate who was the victim and who was the perpetrator. And from there, we shall be able to forge ahead the future and understand clearly what happened during that time. But most deniers, as it was mentioned, engage in a very dangerous hate-filled propaganda, while claiming to advocate for human rights, for political space, for democracy, and all other values that we all cherish. But do they really believe in those values? Are they truly striving to achieve those values? No. Because there is no way you can strive to achieve political space, human rights, and all those claims on a bed of lies and falsehoods. You must have facts. But let me go back to the theme of this year. The theme of this year's commemoration is to learn from our history so that we may be able to shape our bright future. And this helps us to move forward. But move forward in such a manner that guarantees that we do not repeat the past mistakes. So as we move forward, we must simultaneously look back and deeply reflect on what went wrong and why it happened. Otherwise, it could be the commemoration for the sake of it. It must be an opportunity for us to learn from our past mistakes. But based on this theme, I feel compelled to raise several questions rather than attempting to give answers. Because I believe through the asking of these questions, I'll be able to provide a platform for critical thought and sincere contemplation among us all, so that we may be able to be renewed and energized in our fight for peace and stability, unity and reconciliation, justice for all, democratic dispensation, governance, and socio-economic growth. And my first question goes to all Rwandans, my fellow Rwandans. I want to raise this question for you to go and think about. And it goes with the theme of this year's commemoration. have we learned from our history? Because if the theme says we should learn from our history to forge the future ahead, I want to ask if we have learned from our history. As you all know, and it has been presented by different speakers, our society was divided along ethnic lines. And as political scientists accurately put it, the society was divided along constructed ethnic lines. Of course, as Dr. Gakuba educated us, and we already know that it was the colonial administration that actually constructed those identities with the purpose of conquering and controlling our land and the people of Rwanda. But the problem is not there. The problem is the fact that these constructed identities were later on to be embraced by the post-independence successive regimes that took power when Rwanda became politically independent. And this pattern of manufactured differences and divisions would become the precursor for the repeated mass killings from late 1950s, early 1960s, early 1970s, the pogroms against Tutsis in 1980s and 90s, the climax of which was what we are commemorating today in 1994, where we lost 1 million people. So it is therefore historically noteworthy to point out that whatever happened in Rwanda subsequent to colonial rule should be placed in the first place on the feet and head and the hands and the shoulders of the leaders who subjected our country and the people to chronically poor leadership, which perpetuated hatred, statelessness, and misery. And we should also remember that the Tutsis who were killed in all those years, including the 1994 genocide, were killed by their fellow countrymen and women, no strangers. And the reason given, as Dr. James Wala mentioned, the excuse is the fact that they were told by the leaders to do so. Now, listen to this. Your leader, mayor, or governor, or minister, or ambassador, whoever was in power, tells you to kill your wife, tells you to kill your daughter, or son, or friend, and a neighbor. As ridiculous as it sounds, it still happened. It happened that people killed their wives and husbands and children and neighbors and friends because they were told. And it seems that the researchers are saying that's not true. Very unfortunately, and it was mentioned by different presenters here, we still have the so-called politicians, people claiming to be fighting for open political space and political participation and human rights and free speech, all those standards. They pursue those issues using ethnicity as their political card. So this is the question. We know what we got from those divisions and what we got from the politics of identity. Still, we still see a lot of politicians and those fighting for human rights almost pursuing the same political lines. So have we learned lessons? So I'm not going to give you an answer, but I'm asking whether at this point, after 18 years and all those terrible incidents that happened in our country, if we have learned anything as Rwandans. The tactics that are used are the same. And I'm not going to repeat that because the scholars presented it accurately, and we should be very conscious of the fact that the pre-genocide propaganda is no different from what is being used by the, regardless of their number, even though they are few, but that terrible group of individuals who are trying to pursue the same lines. So if we have learned any lessons, I think we should be probably having this number diminishing day by day. If we haven't, it will be very important from this particular occasion and the future events to reflect on this issue and see whether we are really learning from the mistakes that were committed in the past. But let me pose the second question now to a different group. My question goes to the mighty international community. Does the history of genocide in Rwanda tell you something? Does it tell the international community anything? We've heard what Ambassador of Cameroon and others said. On the issues, for instance, of prevention, are we very prepared to intervene whenever there are early signs that something like what happened in Rwanda is going to happen in a particular environment? Are we prepared as the international community? Are the world nations prepared to intervene in any situation? What about intervention? I was talking about prevention, but even intervention, when it happens, how much time do we take to discuss whether Gaddafi is going to kill his people, whether it is a political situation that should be handled itself, or how much time did we take? Had it not been in NATO and the other people who intervened, we would be talking about a different situation in Libya today. That's the question to international community. Have we learned any lessons? Maybe yes, maybe no. What about the justice part even after it happens? We are talking about numerous, enormous number of perpetrators of genocide who are walking free in the Western capitals. It's not a mythical belief from anybody. There are facts. We know the names. We know what they did. They are indicted. They're not even shying away from saying what they did, but they're enjoying the freedom that they find in those capitals. So have we learned any lessons? If you keep those individuals still pursuing the same pre-genocide propaganda, still using the same tactics to divide the people of Rwanda and other nations, do we have to wait? I'm addressing the international community. Maybe Rwanda also belongs to the international community. Do we have to wait until these individuals have gained momentum, they have collected enough resources, they have polarized the society that they're targeting, they have actually started killing so that we intervene, or maybe it makes sense to intervene when they are still organizing? I'm asking whether the international community has learned any lesson from that. For instance, if you look back, the international community through the United Nations Security Council made a courageous decision when they sent troops to Rwanda to oversee the peace process and eventually put in place the broad-based government. That was a very good step, at least for prevention. But of course, when the UN mission and the commander uncovered the conspiracy by President Habyarimana and his regime to exterminate Tutsis and reported to the UN and called for intervention, the international community, UN and the big nations completely became indifferent. And of course, what we ended up getting was to leave the victims in the hands of their predators, and we lost 1 million. But as if that was not enough, as it has been mentioned, even the few troops that were on the ground were withdrawn. And so the killers would kill from 9 to 5, and only to go back in the evening to report about the success, and leading those victims to the killing sites, similar to what happens to the cows when they are led to slaughterhouses. Have we learned any lessons? Has the international community learned any lesson? It's very unfortunate to realize the fact that if the killings that were committed during that time were not committed using any sophisticated tools or weapons. These individuals, yes, the government forces used the modern machinery to kill people, but most of the militias used the blunt or sharpened traditional tools to kill their victims. Honestly, we don't find any reason why there was any intervention from the international community, the UN, and the big nations when these people were using just simple tools, the machetes, blunt and sharpened, just to kill the victims for 100 days, everybody watching. But I'm going back to international community on a related note in the current situation now. If we are part of the international community and we see the danger, and all these scholars who presented today have uncovered what is happening within the circles of the people who still harbor the same ideology, and actually in some situations, like in our case, those who committed genocide are still at large. Not in those capitals, but they are grouped somewhere, reorganizing, rearming to actually finish the unfinished agenda. Before we even intervene in other situations, those perpetrators of the 1994 genocide against Tutsi, they are still at large in Congo, intact, with the weapons, rampaging villages, raping women, throwing grenades in Rwanda, dreaming that one day, yes, one day we shall go back and finish unfinished business. How do we deal with that? Do we have to wait until they do something so that we intervene? Has the international community learned any lesson? Despite the fact that the UN reports of experts have clearly implicated most of those individuals by names and organizations, sanctioned those individuals, that they are not allowed to travel, not allowed to own assets, not allowed to own money, not allowed to do anything. But these individuals, despite the fact that they are on the list of the United Nations Security Council, they are still on some payrolls from these different countries. I think it is high time to raise our voice as Rwandans, the survivors and friends of Rwanda and governments that would want to fight impunity once and for all, to set an example of bringing those individuals to justice. There is no any complication in terms of pursuing those individuals because the preliminary work to indict them and actually establish the crimes they committed is already done. It is the question of enforcement. And that will send a very, very strong signal to the rest of the perpetrators and their supporters. And you should understand when you speak as Rwandans, as someone representing the government here, I speak from my heart because of what we went through. Rwanda is a very organized state, very ready to fight anybody who would want to bring another cycle of genocide in Rwanda. Rwandans have gone beyond that point. As Professor Magui presented today, you have seen the tremendous achievements. But we don't want to be pushed or forced by some of these individuals to slide back into a situation that we escaped. And when you look at the statement that was made by our president on Libya, and I want to quote him, these are very important words. He said, "No country knows better than my own the cost of the international community failing to intervene to prevent a state killing its own people." He goes on to say, "Our responsibility to protect is unquestionable. And this view is backed with the authority of having witnessed and suffered the terrible consequences of international inaction." We are sharing this experience to make sure, and the whole point is to make sure that we learn from the history to be able to forge the bright future for Rwandans, but also for the entire humanity. So Rwandans have learned this they have learned it the hard way. So Excellencies, friends, ladies and gentlemen, as I understand, this has been a long day. I wanted to make sure that on this particular theme of this year, we remind ourselves and our responsibilities as members of the international community, as Rwandans and survivors, to collectively learn from our darkest past to shape our future. And I would want to reassure friends here and Rwandans that the government of Rwanda is committed to uphold our right for unity, forge ahead the common identity as opposed to what divided us, the vision for peace, stable Rwanda, and the justice for all, and of course prosperity, while passionately, together with you, fighting the genocide ideology and other forms of discrimination that inflicted so much damage and destroyed a lot that was so precious to us. We know for a fact that most Rwandans have moved forward and have worked hard to collectively repent and forgive, to put differences aside and come together as one Rwandan people. It is so important that we do not allow those genocides and their supporters to distract us from our success. And I'm very confident, and as His Excellency President Paul Kagame said today during his remarks for the commemoration, that those have no chance in millions of Rwandans. And indeed, they have no chance. So our ideals and values should not be overshadowed by the past, but should continue to be reflected in the good work that we are doing and have been doing for our country today and for generations to come. In closing, let me take this opportunity to thank all of our men and women in uniform who stopped the genocide and who continue to defend our nation. And extend my gratitude to all friends who helped and who continue to help the survivors to pursue their lives. Salute all the survivors for their ongoing sacrifices of forgiving and the willingness to move forward. And thank all Rwandans, indeed, in general, for their resilience and for upholding our dignity as one people, working for our country and for the common good. I want to thank you all for coming and ask you to continue supporting Rwanda in this important journey of becoming the better place for the people of Rwanda, but also for the entire humanity. I thank you very much for your attention. God bless Rwanda. God bless America. Stay blessed. Thank you very much for your attention.